methodical acquisition of new knowledge, right? Trying to like finding out new things in a structured way.
Absolutely, yeah. What's knowledge?
So that's a little bit more nebulous.
They're posed in a particular order for a reason. So, okay. All right.
Yeah, science is explaining things through observation or experiment.
Did you Google? I'm getting it.
Like those
Can you take that?
Go ahead.
Yeah, knowledge is like information, skills, or fact. Fact is a tool.
What is truth then?
What?
Oh, my spell is best.
This is, I really love this. I business information.
So, our perspective, we're kind of saying that the one the same thing as science here is a methodology that you use to sort of endeavor to get knowledge, or to, and we use it in a way to sort of predict things that are really unpredictable, like nature, right?
Well, someone would argue with that, right? Because they're natural laws. There is a predictability if you were to. This is where philosophy and science get mixed, right? Like,
Because they've already been studied. So we know that they're laws because they've already been studied.
okay,
You don't need science for it.
we don't need science
You
for
don't need
that.
science- you don't need science to predict everything. You have natural intuition and behavior. Everything has to be defined by science.
But to say, like, all right, for instance, people say, I have this down to a science, right? And you have total control over things, which is not necessarily. As for knowledge, we boiled it down to basically an awareness. Doesn't always imply total understanding of a concept, but that you're aware of certain ideas, concepts. And as for fact, it's just indisputable. Last year, the Mets did not win the World Series. They're not World Series champions.
Big
You
sign.
have to find somebody. But no, there's,
But anybody being against that is totally false.
okay.
I think for something to be fact, like everyone else has to agree, and that's where like the cultural part comes into play. Because if something is fact and I believe it, it's true, but no one else believes it, then it's not really.
The emperor's wearing no clothes.
Exactly. The Holocaust.
Yeah. Oh.
We thought it was kind of like allegory of the cave, like where Plato was talking about how their like fact was the object that you can't actually see out there in space, and that all you can see are the reflections, the shadows of on the cave wall, and that's your knowledge. It's really what you're aware of and what you're allowed, what you're able to perceive and remember about all the things that have happened. Science we thought it was kind of like trial and error, most of which we can't remember, because therefore not in our knowledge.
Okay. I love Plato got brought in. I like it. Okay. Any other thoughts?
There are no facts.
There are no facts?
Anybody too sure about anything is always wrong.
2 + 2 = 4.
And that's sort of the point of this. Oh, yeah. Sally already got it.
How about everything is fact, we don't necessarily need like a consciousness, or like we could have an entire universe with absolutely no higher consciousness or us in there and it could be full of facts, but it takes
How did it become fact though?
higher consciousness to have knowledge. It would, like the laws of physics would still be there.
What we know as the laws of physics now aren't what were thought of as before, right? There was like a thought of light traveling through ether, and Einstein, or there was a theory of relativity that happened.
There's a truth about how the universe works, and we may not know it, but there are things that govern the universe. And we
come to know.
very
Talking
few
about
of those
God.
answers. What?
Talking about God.
Yes.
We all know there's no God.
Okay. So that was very clear. I Googled it to make the point that I think happened just now. Is that, so when you look it up, what is sex? the knowledge about or the study of the natural world based on facts learned through experiments and observation. That is a definition of science. It's it's a systematic study of something. We are taking knowledge and creating something hopefully that's replicable. Like all of this, even the definition of science that we are basing an entire discipline on isn't clear. And it requires a thought to be clear understanding of two other concepts, knowledge and facts, in order to understand it, of which we can't get a clear understanding of what knowledge is either. Knowledge, if you were to Google it, again, through Merriam-Webster, the fact or condition of knowing something gained through experience or association. It's an understanding of a science, art, or technique. Once again, including fact and science, something that we clearly defined in the room. And we just sort of take, I have knowledge of this. I know this to be true. This is a fact. We say these things and allow ourselves to have our behavior governed by them, which is very, very true and needs to be done. There needs to be a sense of conformity and routine and sort of a procedural manner of what you do in practicing medicine. Yes, I'm not saying throw that out, but I'm also saying that everything that we take for granted in dictating our behavior isn't something that's actually factual or something that we can really say is something concrete at all. So if all of these concepts that we can really define sort of dictate what we do, we don't really know very much. Is sort of where I think philosophy kind of flourishes in giving us ideas about how we can come to understand or know anything. Which brings me to what we can, I think, find in science, which is exciting for us. So there's been a lot of history of science. The Enlightenment is sort of where we had this explanation of a linear progression of knowledge. It's when we started to really put a lot of emphasis on science, and the social sciences were born. We had Durkheim, Max Weber, Marx coming out of like bringing science into a new concept through philosophy that we should be using in order to understand our natural world. And there's just like a lot of thinking going on, and a lot of books are written. This guy is Thomas Kuhn. He was a physicist by training. He was at the University of Cincinnati, I think. This book was published in 1962. It's called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, and he had a very keen interest on the history of science. I bring it here because it's changing the way we think of science, and it also is very applicable to how we should be involved in how science and medicine evolves in our practice. So the cool thing about what Thomas Kuhn did is he did away with the linear understanding of science and scientific knowledge being something that is an area under a curve. It's increasing knowledge underneath sort of a progression of we accumulate more knowledge, we're getting smarter, we have more information, and science is amazing, and we have greater ways of understanding our natural world. He made it into a cycle. So, and this cycle isn't just, this is from 1962, but this sort of idea of having something that we take for granted, having it drift, having it not be sufficient to explain what we think we know, and calling it into question, having a revolt or a revolution, and changing how we see things is something that we've sort of described in other areas. Karl Marx did this in Capital when he talked about the history of the world, and how there were 8 sort of cycles. We're currently in the capitalist cycle, then we'll go to socialism, then we'll go to communism. This is the Kuhn cycle of how science works. Pre-science. So we sort of gather information. We're blind, we have our senses, and everyone has a method of trying to understand their natural world, and we gather such information. Because we're social beings, we create a systematic way of doing things. We work together. We create a paradigm. Thomas Kuhn is actually the first person, is said to be the first person who actually used the word paradigm. Now it's overused, and actually in his book it's completely overused to the point where it really didn't have any meaning, but there's a local and sort of a global sense. Normal science is the practice of paradigm. So we have a sense of, this is how we're going to do things. I am going to observe, I'm going to ask a question, I'm going to systematically try and answer that question through methods of inquiry that everyone agrees on. I'm going to get an answer, and this model works for me, and works for the general community of scientists that I'm working with, is how he said that normal science works. Thomas Kuhn was not a critical theorist. He actually didn't really see the utility of critical thinking necessarily in this mode. He thought it would be sort of a natural thing that would happen when you would start to try and answer questions with your prevailing paradigm, and they wouldn't be able to be answered. So this is sort of where we exist. It's a good happy medium. When we start to ask questions that we don't know how to answer, or we're using our prevailing methods of gaining knowledge and they're not working, if enough people start doing it, they start to sort of not understand, well, how is this possible? I don't want to stay away from pragmatic applications, but just even a microcosm sense, like look at how we've experienced or looked at chest pain, even in 5 years. I still don't know exactly what we're doing, but you should do this, you have to do this, right? And but no, it may not work for this specific subset of patients. It might not work for where I am, where am I practicing, what are we doing? And so there becomes a new way of thinking. And there is, in this book, he talks about revolution. He talks about how we as a collective, in sort of gaining knowledge from as many different areas as applicable to the situation, that we can change, we should change, and this is the point. It's not the acquisition of more and more random knowledge. It's realizing that however we acquire knowledge is actually created by us. We practice it. We are the ones that can actually change it. We can change a paradigm. Once we start allowing ourselves to ask questions that sort of defy an explanation with the current manners in which we can answer them, we have that power, which is super exciting. So this sort of idea is sort of what drew me to medicine. I think that there's a great, not all of us are researchers, I'm not at all. I actually prefer the theory side of this, and thinking about things like this, and am not someone who will be able to do a new trial or clinical trial or answer any medical question of importance. But I think it's important to keep this in mind, because we get to act and be agents in this, because our interface is where the sort of lab, or in theory, or where research becomes practice, which is the point of today. So, my argument is that science is obviously, to me, it's a social construction that we get to define, and we often define as it is useful to whatever it is that we're talking about, which is how most people define most things. It's the most applicable and relevant definition. But we have to be able and be okay with thinking against what we think we should know, or what is told to us that is an absolute. Because if you just keep trying to fit, and this is, I think Silverberg says this a lot, they're trying to fit a square into a round hole. Like when you're trying to answer a question that may not be able to be answered with the methods that you have, then we aren't going to get anywhere. Be okay with thinking. Be okay with not knowing everything. I think that that's, it's a scary thing. I am personally petrified of having the safety net be gone in a few months. But it's also super exciting, and it's also where we get to be a part of potentially social change in a very small way, in our interactions with patients, in our practice of medicine, and being no, East Flatbush is not the middle of America. All of the sort of studies that we look at are not necessarily applicable to where we work. And be critical of what you read. Don't overtly have opinions, but be open to your own fallibility is more so. Realize that you're always wrong. Someone thinks that you're always wrong in any situation, but you're gonna try and do the right thing. This is not critical thinking, which I think may be what we often think of. Yes, you should have the tools to critically analyze a piece of literature or a piece of or a study that is relevant to something that you're practicing clinically. But you should also question where it came from. Why did the person ask that question? Why is it relevant? Who does it matter in my current context? Can I apply it? My last message: keep calm, question everything, and in conclusion, we exist really at the intersection of biography and history. That's how all of us came to be. We're a function and a product of everything that's come before us. What we practice is something that we've sort of inherited as a creation of history, and to me, it's our responsibility, whether you can choose to very much so disagree with me, is to keep questioning in order to move what we do forward. That is it. So, in conclusion, these are a few books. I'm actually moving, so that's also why I put this up. If you actually want to read any of these, I have them. So these are a few of the books that sort of helped me get here and also really change the manner in which I think. Very good and recommended reads. Also, there's a lecture by Sydney, it's the Sydney Men's Lecture from 2001 by Paul Farmer. It's called An Anthropology of Structural Violence. It's kind of long, but it's definitely worth the read. It's shorter than these books. I want to thank these guys. Oh my God, 5 years. I thank you so much. This is a really hard place to work, but it was well worth it. I would do it again, even though I wanted to quit every year. This is New York. Thank you for having a residency of this caliber in the greatest city in the world. This is just like 8 months. Anyway, I didn't survive actually. I probably stayed. It is a great place to train and a great place to be able to enjoy life with all these amazing people in the room. And my parents. I was actually supposed to give this lecture in December. This is my dad and my mom and my sister. My dad ended up getting Guillain-Barré in December, and so I was away for a while. He is now able to walk, and I would not be here without them. And so I get to see them this weekend. It's very amazing. Hug your family. Somebody, one of our attendings actually, and I think I've had this conversation with a lot of our APDs, you don't grow up until one of your parents gets sick. I agree with that now. Or unfortunately if they pass, but I was lucky, and I thank them immensely. This is my baby picture. All right, thank you.